Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to All Things Social Security. I am Stephanie Joy, the attorney at Joy Disability. Welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoy the video. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hey all, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to All Things Social Security. I am Stephanie Joy, the attorney with Joy Disability, and the one you tend to see here with the videos. So today I just wanted to go over how your earnings creates your primary insurance amount, PIA, that will apply for disability, retirement, and ultimately also your family maximum and the things that your dependents can get at certain times. So, and the reason why I brought it up is because I heard for the second time in a month some understanding that they look at your last 10 years of earnings income from work, and it's absolutely false. So let's get to it. I don't know where the 10-year look back came from. I wonder if they were confusing it with other look back periods related, such as your average current earnings. If you're going to have a workers' compensation offset, they will look at your ACE, average current earnings, which is the last few years. I think there's 3 different rules they do with it. I don't follow workers' comp, so I can't tell you exactly what they are, but one of which would be an average of like the last 3 years or something like that. But it's definitely more limited. So Social Security is not the last 10 years. It's generally lifetime earnings, but it's limited to 35 years. 35 years, not 10 years. Okay, so that's the summary of what I want to get to, because like I said, I've heard it all over the place. And fortunately, they do look back much further, which is good when you're going to become disabled because, or even heading to retirement, a lot of people slow down their work. And imagine if they only looked at the last 10 years, yet you were more vigorous in your 40s and maybe even like your early 50s. So it stands to reason. And why not? If you're working the whole time, you're paying in the whole time. All righty. And it's important to know if you're trying to figure it out yourself for retirement purposes, you best know. Okay. So they do look at your entire work history. So every single year that you paid into Social Security is going to be looked at. Doesn't matter if you're 20, 45, or 60. And I'm just skimming down my notes here, guys. There is an article coming out, but I wanted to just get you a video on it sooner rather than later. Now, there is something called indexing. So for instance, like a dollar earned in 1985 is not the same dollar earned today. SSA does adjust your older earnings for inflation. They call it indexing. So your wages from 30 years ago will get bumped up so they can be compared fairly accurately, go away, to what you earned more recently, which is a good thing, obviously, because it means that your early career earnings get real credit. So if you are making, you know, the entry level amount then, not only is it entry level then, which, when you lacked skills and hadn't been able to put in the time to gain the experience yet, you had a lower wage, but also the inflation has made that whole dollar amount substantially different. Okay. So yeah, and so the way it's been explained to me is by doing that indexing, your early career earnings get real credit, not just a tiny fraction of what they were worth back then, because they're going to be an inflationary number is going to be applied to them to make them more relatable to today's money based on inflation. So again, it's the top 35 rules. 35, 35, 35, don't forget it. Once SSA has your full indexed earnings history, they're going to pull out your best 35 years, not your most recent 35 years, even your best 35 years, the years that you earned the most after adjusting for that inflation. So again, it's possible something you earned when you were 20 could be bigger than maybe a year much later, even though you're making much more per hour, or I should say it was much later in time when inflation went up, because they're going to relate those numbers together by applying an inflationary indexing to them. So the 35 years get added up and divided by 420, because that's the number of months that occur in a 35-year period. And that'll give SSA your average monthly earnings. They call it your AIME, AIME, not to be confused with your ACE, ACE, which was that very limited 3, 4, 5-year period I was talking about when it came to workers' comp. I don't know if ACE is used for something else as well. All I know of it is with regard to workers' comp, because I have plenty of workers' comp clients, and we always have to just give a little thing like, if you breach the 80% rule, you might have to worry about an offset. So average indexed monthly earnings, that particular figure then, your AIME, then gets run through a formula to reduce your actual benefit amount, which is your PIA, primary insurance amount. So the key thing to understand is that The SSA is not looking for what you made recently. They're looking at what you made at your peak. So all of your best years. If you have 35 years that ended 5 years ago and you're making something less now, you're going to get to use those earlier 30. All right. I don't want to repeat myself too much. And my notes kind of do that. Now, what happens if you work less than 35 years? Because plenty of people do, whether they become disabled or not. And certainly people who become disabled often, probably more often than not, work less than 35 years. And this is the part that's going to surprise you probably. What happens if you didn't work the 35 years? You could have been taking time off to raise the kids. That's very common. Maybe you went back to school. Maybe you had temporary health problems or ones that took you out entirely, like the kind of work I do representing disabled people that are trying to get their Social Security disability or SSI, of course. But whatever the reason, if you had fewer than 35 years of covered earnings on your record, the SSA doesn't just use what you have and then associate it with a 35-year requirement. They fill in I should say that they do, and I'll tell you when they don't, because with the people I work with, they don't. So that's why we're getting to this. If you are not disabled and you just don't have 35 years, they're going to fill in the missing years with zeros, actual zeros. And those zeros are going to get averaged in like real earnings for all those months that they apply to. So if you went 3 years without earning, so you only had 32 years of earnings, some of which were very low, you're like 18, they are going to put zeros in there. So that's like 10% of your, what would be a normal income if you'd kept working, is now 10% zeros. Imagine what the impact even that has. So let's say you work 30 years, SSA would average 30 years of real earnings plus 5 years of nothing. So the big fat 5 zeros times 12 is 60, and your average income comes down, and that lowers your AIME, that average monthly earnings we're talking about, which then lowers your benefit, because that's the monthly income they come up with through the AIME is what that calculation with bend points and everything else. It's kind of an interesting calculation. We don't have to get into that here. It's not really important, but you could find it on SSA.gov, and therefore you're going to have a lower, if your monthly is lower, your average monthly earnings is lower, so is the percentage of that you're going to get for your primary insurance amount for your Social Security. So if you are in your late 50s or early 60s and you're wondering whether it's worth working a few more years, the answer might be yes. Even part-time work can replace a 0 year on your record, and it won't be a 0 at least anymore. And that can meaningfully increase your monthly benefit for the rest of your life. Every 0 you replace with real earnings helps. Obviously, the higher the earnings, the better, but some earnings is better than nothing. Plus you get money in your pocket. So where did this 10-year thing come from? I am not sure. Like I said in the beginning, I could speculate on a few things, but there's also this. The 10 years is about something completely different. To even qualify, and this is where they might also be getting it mixed up, to even qualify for Social Security retirement benefits, you need to have earned at least 40 credits of your lifetime. You earn up to 4 credits a year maximum. You could earn 1, 2, 3, or 4. And ideally you work 4. It doesn't even take full-time work to earn 4. So 40 credits roughly equals 10 years of work. So that's another potentially where the 10-year fallacy came in with regard to what they look at to determine your insurance amount, what kind of income they look at. That's just the minimum of work, the kind of work that would earn you 40 credits, which is roughly equal to 10 years of work. That's the minimum to actually get vested in retirement. If you didn't hit that, you don't get any. It has nothing to do with the amount you're going to get or anything like that. Although, of course, if you only worked 10 years, your chances are, because 25 years will be zeros, you're going to have a very small primary insurance amount. But that getting vested to be able to get some kind of retirement, even if it's $500 a month, is what that 40 quarters. And again, we say it's like 10 years because there's 4 quarters in a year, but it could have been spread out all over 40 years of a lifetime. It doesn't have to be in a 10-year period either. But that's why I think, people confuse, or one of the reasons, probably the main one, I don't know, the 10 years with how much you're going to get. They're going to look at your last 10 years of income. No. So think of it this way. The 10-year rule is your ticket to get into the stadium of SSA, but your actual score at the game is the benefit amount you collect every month. And that's based on your best 25 years of playing the game, aka working and paying taxes on it, by the way. That under the table stuff you do doesn't count. So it's 2 completely different things. And the mistake of thinking that the last 10 years of your income are going to be what counts is not true. I will also say that I think it is true, not with Social Security, but possibly with certain pension. I don't know if it would be unions or other government pensions, not Social Security, or maybe even privates, because I was speaking to someone last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was saying something about, I'm trying to get as much time as I can this year, even overtime, and it's like killing him. Because when I retire out, they're going to base something, I don't know what, but maybe it's his pension amount on the last X years. So it's a much smaller amount. It's based on what you left with, and that's completely different from Social Security. So I think all of this might be lending itself to why people think it's the look back of income for Social Security, and it's not. So you can go to SSA.gov and pull up your Social Security statement. I suggest everyone always do that every year. And if you're planning on filing for disability, you definitely want to do it, because once you, not for this reason, you can always get your earnings from them online, but once you trigger an application for Social Security disability, you're not going to be able to get your estimate of what they're saying your ballpark estimated benefit amount will be. That's going to be something you're not going to be privy to. But the part that will be available, it's going to show all of the annual earnings that you earned pretty much since you started, whether you were a teenager or not. It goes way, way back. And it's what this SSA knows that you earned because you paid Social Security tax on it. Again, anything you do under the table, which I got to tell you isn't legal, is not going to count. Or if you make revenue that you do report, but you write it all, itemize it all, not itemize, deduct it all on your business expenses on your Schedule C, obviously that's not going to count either. Only the bottom line at the end of the Schedule C will generally be what's going to be what you pay your Social Security tax on. All right. I will say, keep this in mind too. We're talking about 35 years, and that's for your PIA, and that's for what's going to create your PIA that you're going to retire and depend upon. However, if you become disabled as defined by the SSA, any of those months that you would have worked to gain the 35 that are now going to be zeros if you don't do the SSD application and prevail are now, once you're SSD disabled, all those disabled years don't count as zeros, they don't get worked in. So the 35 years is not the 35 years anymore. But for everybody else, it is. But it drives home the point too that I want to make, that if you are unable to work due to disability, not due to taking care of your parent, your aging parent, that's not you being disabled. If you are disabled and cannot work full time and are not working SGA, but are working part-time, that's fine. You can file for SSD, and you will prevent all those low income or no income from changing up the trajectory of what you had accomplished. And remember, your estimates that are on the SSA site, your retirement estimates, and they also have a disability estimate on there. Those are all the retirement estimate you see. If you read the fine print, it will tell you that it's assuming that you continue to earn the same amount you're earning now, even if you're 40, potentially, up to, I think it's age 62. So once you stop because you're disabled, that whole estimation is gone because you never did put in all that time. And that's where that disability number comes in that they give you in the estimate if you have not yet applied. But they're not going to, if you win your SSD, they're not going to substitute in zeros. They're just going to use a different range of years as the range that has to apply to you because you didn't have the possibility of, working robustly for 35 years because you became disabled. And fortunately, the whole point of SSA is to recognize that when someone is disabled and simply can't do it, they shouldn't be held as if they can. All right. Thanks, guys. I hope that's helpful. I'll talk to you later. Bye.